So last week, we opened our discussion with our Lenten discussion with those reflections and how we deal with reflections in the world. And I'll carry that through the next few weeks. And there's a lot of, I told you I'd be pulling a lot from Greg Braden. He's done a lot of work researching the Essenes and the Essene mirrors. There's other work now. I mean, I did some searches. There's some other really lovely philosophers that also have information on those if you want to explore. And the idea of the mirrors is that we can recognize, learn about, and grow in our relationship with Spirit, with God, through a recognition of how the world is reflecting back to us in different ways, both the quote positive and the quote negative that we are dealing with internally. And it's an internal process. So the idea is not we are bad or we are wrong or we're overly good, depending on what we're noticing. It's how do we react with that? How do we align that with compassion and love? What does that tell us about how we are viewing our own healing in this moment, in this existence? And then with that, how do we maneuver ourselves to a place of even more healing and more connection and more compassion so that we become that reflection and mirror for others? And in that way, we help each other all the time, that we are here to really help each other get to know these things. So the first section I'm going to talk about today is that actual present moment. What are we learning in our very present moment and what we're recognizing? What are we recognizing in the people around us, our relationships, situations, experiences, and how they are affecting us right now? So it's a way of pointing us towards ourselves in understanding, and also understanding the things that we fear as much as the things that we love, and how do we adjust to that? And then not to put one in the totally negative or totally positive column, but to know how we can choose compassion in either situation. And in that we heal. So this whole community, the unity movement, was built on the idea of healing, and the idea of healing ourselves and our own selves and the way we recognize to be that agent of healing for the rest. And then when we healing is really bringing love into the moment, bringing compassion into the moment, aligning with that. Which is why we say healing is always there, because it's a shift of awareness into that alignment, much more than anything else. So again, the first mirror is, what are we in the present moment? What are we in this present moment? What's happening to me right now? What am I recognizing right now? It's the idea of that so within, so without. What we're recognizing within is what we're going to recognize without. Not so much the other way around. We'd like to think that all this stuff that happens in our world is what causes us, but really we still have the choice, right, on how to react to that. And what triggers us? What do we take care of for us? And how do we move into those healing moments, even through external life changes? So it's kind of like tuning to the frequency, right? Which frequency would we like to tune into? We have a whole bunch to pick from, right? And on your radio, you might choose one a lot, but then sometimes you feel like another. Yeah, and you change that channel. For me, it's kind of like what's going on. We're totally readjusting our frequencies to what it is we actually understand and want to hear, or that aligns with where we're at in that hearing. It's not always, though, that it's also what we're paying attention to. So, social media gives us both ends of that. It's like we don't want to totally disregard everything that's going on by clicking. We don't want to see that, right? Because it gives us some idea of where we're at. But we don't want to immerse ourselves so much in things that don't align with us that it makes us question it either. So it's like finding that balance, finding that balance. And finding our free will in that balance. Okay, so I do have another superhero example for you. We take the idea of the Hulk, right? And we know the Hulk is either really, really angry or kind of this cool little meek scientist, right? And there's two stark differences in that, huge differences on what is available at any certain time. But as we move forward in the story of the Hulk, there's a part where Bruce Banner, the scientist, recognizes one of the ways he can make the Hulk happen when it's needed, when it's necessary, when his friends are in danger, is to recognize the anger that's always in him someplace. And how neat is that to say, I don't need to totally disassociate with that, but I can understand when it's with me and when it's useful to acknowledge it and when it's not useful to acknowledge it. And then the further you go in the story of Bruce Banner and the Hulk, there's an agreement made between each sides, and he becomes Professor Hulk, right? Where it's the best of both of them presenting at the same time. And for me, that's the healing moment of his story, because he's not denying that he's this angry, beastie person, right? And he's not only trying to be this lovely scientist person. He's said, you know what, I'm really both, and what can I do to bring out the best in both? And then we end up with this funky green version of Bruce Banner that's both scientist and powerful at the same time, but without that explosion of anger. It's finding the power in it without having to always use that. Does that make sense a little? I think that's available to each of us when we recognize that part that maybe we're not so proud of, or maybe we don't want to look at, right? But realize that there's a certain power in that. And how can we integrate that and still be us, but not deny parts of ourselves in the process? And then to recognize that the things around us really do show us what's going on in us at the same time, whether we want to appreciate that or not in the moment. A few weeks ago, both of the boys, the younger boys, just were off. They were argumentative. They didn't want to do their schoolwork. They were like extra emotional. And at first I brushed it off as the preteen, teen hormone stuff, but a couple days in, I finally said, do you know why you're acting this way or feeling this way? And neither one of them could say specific, but they did say, I just know I'm sad right now. I'm sad and I don't know what to do with it. So I actually sat with that a couple hours. I'm like, how do I help my kids when they're like in this ocean of sadness and don't know why? And I realized, you know what, I was feeling much the same, but I was ignoring it. And theirs was like right on the surface. So there was something in our whole house we had to take care of, and in that moment, they were reflecting to me what I was ignoring. And it was like right there, right there. And, sometimes when we argue with each other, it's like, well, what part of us is really the irritated part? What happened? What's being shown to us? What do we need to take care of? So I made some adjustments. We got some extra sled riding time and made sure we got outside. We made a schedule. We actually agreed on a bedtime and agreed certain times I would sit with them to watch TV. We just tweaky little things, but it totally worked. It totally worked. We kind of got back to that talking and figuring things out. And I know that's just a tiny example, but the world is showing us all the time. What are we recognizing all the time? And And what are we recognizing about that divine essence, that Christ light in us, and our relationship with that light presence? Our relationship with self is how we recognize our relationship, not only with others. And if we recognize a oneness of everything, then it is our relationship with that divine source. You know, what's going on with us right then? Yesterday, I gave a talk, an online talk to people about aspects of spirit and heaven and our guides and our angels and our helpers and all of that we have to draw on, and masters and teachers. And, you know, and we talk a lot about the master teacher, Jesus here. But in the middle of me speaking, I remember, and this is for me, you know, when you speak, sometimes it's for you to learn as much as teaching everybody else. Out of my mouth came, are we moving, are we so stuck in the person that Jesus was and not who we can be through that example? I think sometimes we get so stuck in the stories or well, we have to do it this way. And yet that was a reflection for Jesus in the moment that was recorded for his own relationship with everything, to even show us that we could have a relationship with everything. You know, much more to completely pray to that memory all the time. It's like using what we have, that mirror in those writings, as an example that we can have our own relationship, more than trying to copy his relationship, which I think is much more powerful, really, because I don't know that, you know, any of the masters of our world that we recognize, even the ones today, would want us to copy them or emulate them, but to know that we can be our own version of that light in the process. So our interpretation of our experience, even our interpretations of sacred writings, are all a mirror. You know, and if it wasn't, then every single holy book over the entire world would be saying exactly the same thing at the same time, and we wouldn't have a bunch of interpretations, right? Because they truly are a reflection of our relationship with everything, with light. And to recognize that, and to allow our interpretations to grow and expand and encompass more compassion and more love. Because I know sometimes in my life, I read them very narrow. You know, this is it, this is what we have to do. And yet it's not a have to, it's a reflection point, right? Greg Braden says in Walking Between the Worlds, that in witnessing events, in reading texts, in expressing in our daily lives, when these things push our beliefs and senses to the edge of who we believe we are offered an opportunity to awaken the strength of our truest nature, gracefully leading us to the memory of ourselves. I like that, the memory of ourselves, because in there we know someplace who we really are. Within the hearts of children of forever lies the seed that each planted for themselves long ago. Let's say that again. Within the hearts of the children of forever lives the seed that each planted for themselves long ago. A gift of truth is sleeping. Awakened, that seed rekindles the ancient promise of those who have come before us. The promise that each soul survives the darkest moments of life to return home once again, intact and with grace. And that promise is the seed of truth that we today have named compassion. And you are the children of forever. So whether we are witnessing, choosing, have an opportunity to choose compassion, is being reflected back to us each and every day, and our relationship with that. How we interpret our closest relationships, how we describe ourselves, how we interact with the environment and people that don't share our own perspective. Recognizing everything, absolutely everything, as an expression of the one source of the Christ light, giving us the opportunity to reflect and accept compassion and act on it. Also, a quote from Walking Between the Worlds. If you acknowledge that there is a single source of all that is and all that will ever be, do you also acknowledge that every life event, without exception, is part of the one? Do we trust in the process of life that is shown to us? Do we trust in divine timing with no accidents? Do we believe that your life mirrors your quest to know yourself in all ways? Believe that in knowing that in our extremes, we find balance, like Professor Hulk, huge extremes, and yet there became a balance in his story. Do we truly believe that your life essence is eternal and that your body may enjoy the same experience of eternity? If all that is in the affirmative, then how can we at the same time judge ourselves, a life event, the choice or an action of another as right, wrong, good, bad, or anything other than an expression of the one? Now, this doesn't mean that we turn our backs on terrible, icky things. That's not what it means. But it means there's a choice in all of those for everybody. Do we allow the reaction and thoughts and choices we make from that as a way to bring ourselves in alignment with healing and love and compassion? Or do we get angry and say how terrible it is and lash out? Totally. And there's a difference here between the justice of the moment and the anger of the moment. In choosing the compassion, in choosing to recognize absolutely everything as part of the one, no matter if we see it as a plus or a negative, right? We effectively become a mirror for others, helping the whole world reflect back the same. When I thought about this, the first thing that came to mind was the Droste effect, and I hope I pronounced that right. But it's the idea that reflections done in a certain way always reflect back infinitely. So you can make a line or a circle of mirrors with lighting the right way and stand in the middle, and there's reflection like into infinity through the mirrors, no matter which way you look. For me, that's like the perfect visualization of getting to that point of compassion. And I'm, the world may be a little way off of that. But if we are in a position to be just one of those mirrors, the circle starts, right? And then somebody sees that as that external reflection. If they're looking that way, we have that choice. It's big, it's huge to recognize everything as a reflection and of the one, everything, and our choices in it. Which brings us back to our daily word, that we honor that connection with everything all the time, and keep aligning ourselves with that compassion. Thank you.